Well, going back to Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, and coming along shortly, Bill, Ari Wasserman. Do you think that's going to make people, oh my gosh, they're telling their friends Ari's going to be on the show, or people are like, oh, I'm out then. I'm not watching this one.
They should be excited. Ari has become an ally of the North, so they should be fired up about Ari's presence on the show.
Ari is a very interesting person because his family is from Ohio. He grew up in Arizona, but he went to college in Arizona, but then he came north and covered Ohio State for a very long time. So we've sort of bred him a little bit as a northern sleeper agent. And then we sent him out into the world filled with the knowledge and passion of a northerner. But now he's in Texas and he's, dealing with SEC people and Southern people all the time.
He's in the mud. Like we observe it from afar and comment on it. He is living in it.
He is neck deep. So he will be along with Ari. We are going to revisit the playoff picks we made with Ari last time he was on this show in October, what we got right, what we got wrong, what we got right and wrong with our Heisman predictions. But then right now we are going to do with Ari the game we're most looking forward to in the playoff. We each pick a playoff dark horse, and then we each make two outrageous predictions for the playoff. And then at the end of the show, we'll be back with what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking. But Bill, some Northern news off the top. There's stuff popping. There's coaching hires. There's portal stuff. And I think the most important thing is that Michigan has hired an offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey. And I will say this hire reminds me of a couple other recent Northern OC hires. What do you think of Chip Lindsey, who was at North Carolina? That Mac Brown got let go and that staff got washed out, and now here he is working for the Wolverines.
I don't think it's the most exciting hire. I wasn't exactly sure what Sherrone Moore was going to do. Whether that was go like a younger up and coming guy, a more established guy. This is clearly the more established route. Chip Lindsey's a former head coach too, so maybe that's helpful to Sherrone Moore. Chip Lindsey was a head coach at Troy for a couple of years, so like the bar was low. It was nearly impossible, I think, for Michigan to be in a worse spot than it was with Kirk Campbell last year. So Michigan has done a nice job of getting more experience. A guy that has had some pretty good production at some of his stops. I just thought maybe Michigan would take a bit of a bigger swing here than it did, and I also have some questions, I think, like stylistically about what this fit is like. If you look at Chip Lindsey's background a little bit, especially at Troy, they were a bad rushing team, but more than that, they didn't run the ball a lot. They were near the bottom of the country in rushing rate. And, Michigan runs the ball more than a lot of other teams, but even like at North Carolina, where they had a pretty good rushing offense with Omari and Hampton at running back, they still didn't run the ball as much as Michigan has run it. So Sherrone Moore wants to maintain that mentality, I think, for the Michigan program because it's so ingrained there. But I just wonder a little bit how Chip Lindsey might mesh with that. But there's no doubt that like Chip Lindsey's background will make Michigan a better passing outfit than it has been, and certainly was last year.
When you make a hire like this, you are either deciding, do we need to change? Do we need to shake up? Do we need to do something differently on offense? Or do we just need to be more competent at what we know we want to do? And so this feels like in the range to me of the Tim Lester hire at Iowa last year and the Jeff Grimes hire at Wisconsin this year, which is, let's be more competent at what we know we want to do. So Wisconsin they changed drastically with Phil Longo. And now if they're going to go back to running the ball more and we just want to be competent at our thing, Jeff Grimes makes sense. Iowa, Brian Ferentz was not good at his job. Kirk Ferentz did not want to turn the offense on its head, but they just needed somebody more competent to do the Kirk Ferentz offense. And I think most Iowa fans were happy with what Tim Lester did this year. If you want to change it up, if you want to be Pat Narduzzi at Pitt and we're going to bring in Cade Bell and go about it a different way, when Ryan Day got hired at Ohio State as the OC, Urban Meyer said, we have to throw the ball. They couldn't throw the ball in 2016 and they got shut out in the playoff. And that was like, okay, that's a line in the sand. We've got to throw it. We've got to change. This to me is Sherrone Moore saying, we don't have to change. We just have to have a baseline of competence with the Michigan way. And Sherrone Moore has executed that Michigan way. And just he needs a dude that he believes in. And I think that could work, right? I think that absolutely could be fine. Did you think Michigan needed a turbo injection of something different, or just somebody better able to help them be who they are?
I don't think they needed an injection of something different. They needed to be better than they were this past year. Like what Jim Harbaugh did for the last 3 years of his tenure, once he got a quarterback, was pretty good with me. But I actually like this. We'll see what it looks like on the field. I actually think that this could be more of a change than I was anticipating. Like
Okay.
I saw John in the chat said that he's run the ball a ton. He's run the ball well because he had a really good running back. They 49% rushing rate 2 years ago was 86 in the country. This year it's 53%. It's like 56 in the country. So they run the ball about average the last year and not so much the year before. And it's okay. Like if you want to push yourself forward a little bit, if you're Michigan and you're getting Bryce Underwood, right? So you're going to want to throw the ball more, I would imagine. I just don't have a firm grasp, I guess, on like what this means for Michigan philosophically as an offense. It's not like he's going to come in. He's not coming to do the Phil Longo thing, like turn a historic rushing team into an air raid team. That's not what I'm saying. But I thought maybe they would try to find someone like, was it Brian Greasy, right? Is the 49ers quarterbacks coach, like
Yes.
that kind of offense that's like explosive and creative, but it's run oriented. And I don't know that this is that necessarily.
Okay. Do you think this will work though? I think this is fine.
Yeah.
And I think
I think
a
it's fine.
baseline level of competence with what Michigan has established as an identity sure seems like it has worked pretty well before. And I think they could get back to that.
I think it could definitely be fine. Yeah. And like I said, like it's hard to be worse than they were last year. Like as long as Michigan continues the way it recruits and develops on the offensive line and at running back and is going to have more competent quarterback play, like I think it can definitely get back to what it was offensively that was leading Michigan to be like closer to the top of the sport than it was last year.
Yeah, and I don't mean to only cite the only thing I ever cite, but again, Iowa was 121st in the Brian Fremeau offensive rate last year, drive to drive, and this year they were 54th. So that is quite an improvement, right? Like, so, hey, we have the 54th best offense in the country. Well, compared to 121, that's great. By the Fremeau Index, Michigan this year had the 65th best offense. So they're nowhere near as bad as Iowa was a year ago. But if you can cut it in half, if you can jump from 65th to 30th, then Michigan is in a fight to be a playoff team, right? I don't think Michigan has to have a top 10 offense. And I think this very much can accomplish that. So
yeah, I'm pretty surprised they didn't go NFL. If only like as like a selling point for Bryce Underwood. And also I guess how good going to the NFL had been for the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
But it could I think fine is where I'm at. Fine, yeah. Not like super inspiring, but better than it was. So,
and Michigan did have the 5th best offense a year ago when they won the national title. So it's not like they were just a defense. You know, they really were good at what they did. Okay, Nebraska. You want to talk about this? Defensive coordinator promotion, right? John Butler, who had been in the building, is now going to be the DC after Tony White left for Florida State.
Yeah, I feel similarly about this one. And honestly, maybe a little worse because he's replacing Tony White, who was a very good defensive coordinator who's going to Florida State. And Matt Rule poached Tony White off of the Syracuse staff. Like he was a good defensive coordinator at Syracuse, and Matt Rule stole him from Syracuse to come run a good defense in Lincoln. And this just feels like obvious and like not a swing. I don't think anyone was banging down John Butler's door to come be their defensive coordinator. This just feels like Matt Rule going maybe a little too familiar. I know they've made some outside hires to fill out the defensive staff, but again, like coming off of this year where you took a little bit of a step forward, but maybe not as big of a step forward as you were hoping to, just felt like there was an opportunity to swing a little bigger here for Nebraska. So John Butler's a very experienced coach. He has coached in the NFL. He's been a coordinator before, but he actually doesn't have a ton of coordinator experience. He was a defensive coordinator for 1 year at Penn State. He was the defensive coordinator for 1 year, I think, at Catholic University back in the 80s, and maybe had one other year at a lower level where he was actually the defensive coordinator. So I don't know. I get like I think maybe coach or head coaches, when they're trying to deal with transfer portal and signing day and all the roster movement, and you're like playing and trying to prepare for a bowl, I wonder if they lean a little too familiar and easy with coaching decisions sometimes. And this kind of feels like that.
No, I think that happens. And especially, they went Dana Holgerson as a friend, but outside the building, and came in and then promoted it. It's hard when 9 things are going on at the same time. They're now, like you said, they're now in bowl prep. They're worried about the portal. And even if you're going in the portal and you're trying to keep some of your defensive guys around / trying to get some defensive guys, you might need to have a defensive coordinator to do
somebody. Right.
So you can't wait. And so to have a comprehensive search when now you had to do it on offense and bring in somebody because it wasn't good enough, and then your defense was good enough that your guy got hired away. That's like a tough spot to be in. Your team is average. Your defense is so good, your coordinator got poached. Your offense is so bad, you had to replace your coordinator. That's a lot. So,
yes.
And I do also think, no offense to like a promotion internal hire, not that Matt Rule has all the time in the world, but if this doesn't work, then it's a 1-year thing, and then you go do a search when you have more time to do it, right? So
yeah, I guess so. I just
John
like
Butler.
don't.
It's hard.
Yeah, I want more juice. But with both of these hires, I wanted more juice.
Yeah, that could be an off-season ranking of who needs juice and just who needs their own. Like the breakfast is fine. That just needs to be warmed up a little bit. You don't need some breakfast. It's like, man, I need some pineapple mango juice with these eggs and these hash browns to really get this over the top. And then sometimes it's like, listen, eggs, toast, and coffee, I'm good. It's just a little cold. Can you take this in the back and put it in the microwave? And you're okay. So if Matt Rule wants to put it in the microwave for 90 seconds, I'm okay with that for now, because I get it. So they've got a plan at Nebraska. I'm not sure what to think of Nebraska. Like, I kind of get it, but also they kind of fell apart in the second half. So I like, if you're Nebraska, do you want more of the same? Because you're like, I think it's there. It just needs to be a little bit better. Or is it like, no, this is not working. Let's flip this on its head. I think clearly this hire says more of the same, just a little better.
Yeah, and like the defense for Nebraska was pretty good for most of the year. So they had kind of like one really bad game against Indiana, but
coaching's hard.
Coaching is hard. That's why they're well compensated for it.
Yeah. Major safety kind of floating around. Do you want to talk about Dylan Thieneman? This is the Purdue safety we've said he might be the Caleb Downs of this year, and it would sure be nice if Purdue's going to lose him. Keep him in the North. Is that a good plan in your mind?
I like the plan. I mean, he'll have everybody. I saw he did like an interview with On3, and he basically said like every school in the country has reached out to me because he's one of the best safeties in college football. But he does reportedly have visits set up with Oregon and Ohio State, which I would love to see him go to either place. Yeah, keep a player like that in the North. Like, or both teams are going to be losing starting safeties. Oregon's losing both of its starting safeties. Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage, who are both transfers into Oregon, are out of eligibility after this year. Ohio State is losing Lathan Ransom, but will return Caleb Downs for next season. So I think, and both teams also have like young players who could be ready to start, but maybe Dylan Thieneman is just kind of too good to pass up on if he's interested in your team. So I'll be interested to see maybe how far Ohio State might be willing to go to stay in that, or if someone, and he's going to get a lot of money, if that number gets pretty high, does Ohio State just kind of feel content with what it has, rising up the ranks to play alongside Caleb Downs? I don't know.
Yeah. Another guy in the portal that would be great to keep North. So Thieneman, by the way, is from Indiana. So let's keep him North. Josh Thompson, the Northwestern offensive lineman, is from Michigan. So let's keep him North. And this is one of those, this is just, Northwestern's almost a little bit like a MAC school in some of this stuff. Like Northwestern had a great year 2 years ago, but like when you peel off, we've talked about that sort of what is the most difficult part of the portal is maybe peeling off the 25 best players in the MAC every year. Northwestern last year lost its best offensive lineman, Josh Preeb, to Michigan, who then led Michigan in offensive snaps this year. I think was solid at guard for like a Michigan offense that wasn't quite as good and had a couple guys moving in and out of the lineup. He did his job the whole year. And now Josh Thompson was Northwestern's best offensive lineman this year, and now he's in the portal. But it'd be good to keep him north, right?
What are they doing at Northwestern with offensive linemen, by the way? To have Rashawn Slater and Peter Skronsky to go in the first round of the draft back-to-back years, and then they get a starter poached to Michigan, and now they're having another starter who's going to get poached to probably Michigan, Ohio State, or Michigan State. Like, Northwestern, sneaky good offensive line program.
I mean, but it's like, are there offensive lines good? Like, this is the very difficult thing of, you know what? We can kind of mine it and find a guy. Find like a real, but it's like maybe more difficult to put together a group of 5, and it's like, oh, we found this guy, and it's like, and now he's gone. Yeah, and this is one of those where like I'm not saying, I mean, it's part of the deal, but I can imagine how it could be frustrating at a place like that where if you look at Michigan or Ohio State or some of these other schools that might be poaching, it's like, well, your offensive line last year, 4 of your 5 starters were better than anybody that we had. And now you're taking our one guy who is at your level and you're taking him. Like, why is that fair? And it's just, I mean, fair doesn't matter. What's fair? It's just a reality. But the same thing is happening, and it sounds like he's going to wind up at a pretty big place, right? But keep him north.
Yeah, keep him north. He's started guard and tackle, which for Ohio State's purposes, I think is ideal because Ohio State needs probably 2 new starting tackles, potentially a new starting guard. It needs maybe multiple tackles, regardless of whether they're not going to start anyway. So Josh Thompson would check a few boxes for them. But he's from Michigan, so it could be hard to keep him away from either Michigan or Michigan State.
Yeah. And then Anthony Calandria, who was the starting quarterback at Virginia, is visiting both Pitt and Syracuse. This is going to be the Thursday show, so we don't want to go too far down the road on this. But again, it was your idea. Why don't you explain to people first, Bill, what our Thursday KOTN is going to be? Yeah,
we're going to run through all 28 teams and just kind of assess the QB situations, tell you who has a returning starter, who's pretty obviously going to be the starter next year, who might have a guy who's rising up the depth chart to be the starter next year, and then who definitely needs to go into the transfer portal to find their starter for 2025.
Yeah. So, and just as part of the research for that, the 28 teams in the North, I'll tease you with this for now. 28 teams in the North, the guys they started with this season as their starting quarterback, like who won the job initially, 13 of those 28 were new portal guys who arrived in the portal in this offseason. I would say 11 of those 13 went from pretty well to very well. So when we have a conversation like this, we're talking about the idea that half of our teams could be finding their 2025 starting quarterback right now, and most of them could work out pretty well. So this super matters, Bill. This is like a quarterback free agency extravaganza, and it can shape what kind of season you have.
No doubt. And we're going to have, in this particular case, we have Pitt and Syracuse hosting the same guy. I don't think that'll end up being the only case where we have multiple Northern teams kind of going after the same quarterback. But the one that jumped out to me, was Anthony Calandria from Virginia. And we'll talk more about it on Thursday, but like Syracuse, makes sense. They definitely need a starter. Pitt's a little more interesting there, but we'll discuss that further on Thursday.
And just more guys keep going in. Fernando Mendoza from Cal is going in the portal. That would be a guy, absolutely, that would be great to have in the North. Caden Salter from Liberty. Has visited Syracuse or reportedly will visit Syracuse. I mean, obviously Syracuse is one of these schools losing Kyle McCord, and with how well that went with McCord, I'm 95% sure that the Syracuse starting quarterback for 2025 is the guy they're going to grab out of the portal. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like this is what we're talking about here. And there are even some guys who, some of the backups that, at least 2 in particular, some of the backups that in the spring football, when we were talking about that, I was like, man, I like some of these young backups, future starters in the North. They're in the portal. they're leaving. So even what you thought was the plan, they're out the door. And so now you have to go to the portal because your plan is in the portal. So that'll be what we'll be doing on Thursday. What we're doing right now is talking with Ari Wasserman. Everybody loves him. We had a great discussion. Buckle in. We'll be talking about everything regarding the playoff with Ari right after this on Kings of the North. Joined now on Kings of the North by our friend and yours, Ari Wasserman of I call it the Ari and Andy show. I don't know.
That's the right way.
Official, that's okay. That's
correct. Yeah.
On3, longtime college football aficionado, was here the last week in October, and we did some playoff predictions, and we said, then we'll have you back, Ari, to see how we did. So it's good to see you, brother.
It's good to be back, guys. And I got to tell you, loyal listener, Kings of the North and Kings of Columbus have been electric the last 10 days for obvious reasons. And it's just such a good show. You guys do such a great job. And, the thing that I'm trying to control myself on is like when I'm talking on the national show, like I think I've referenced Kings of the North like 19 times. And I think Andy's just like, all right, dude, we get it. You listen to Kings of the North. It's like, because you have these ideas and then like I think them. Yeah, has that ever happened to you where like you hear something and then you think that you think them, but it's only because you heard somebody smart say it? Like that happens on your show with me all the time. It's like I think my opinions form listening to you, and then like they're my opinion, but then it was your thought. So like I'm having a hard time. I feel like part of me needs to stop listening to your show because it's too good.
I don't do that subconsciously. I just full on steal people's thoughts and then pull them off.
Yeah,
my entire career is based on that.
but that's why I do. I try my best to cite the show because like I don't want you to be like, yeah, he just has this like really interesting thought that I thought first and outlined for my audience already without citing it. So very good stuff, and I'm super excited to be here. And yeah, we've got a lot to get into, so I'm excited.
So what we're going to do here, we're each going to make 2 outrageous predictions for the college football playoff, what we think is going to happen in this bracket. We are going to each pick our dark horse, whatever that means to everybody, the team, like the off-the-radar team, and we're each going to pick a game that we're excited for. It might be a first-round game that we're definitely going to get, or it might be like, oh, I'd love to see this matchup in the semis or something like that. But what we're going to do first is see who is the smartest of us. So we did this, Landis, we did this. I wrote it all down and I looked it all up. We did this the last week of October. We went through and made college football playoff picks and Heisman picks. And it was the week before the first college football rankings came out. And we said we made our 12-team bracket. We were going to give everybody 2 points for getting a team correct, that they make the field, and you get 1 bonus point if you nailed their seed exactly. Bill, do you remember when we laid this out, the parameters, how we talked about that?
I do. I believe that sounds correct. And yeah, I know at least how I did, was at least when it came to team and seed, was not very good.
Was not very good? You're not feeling the best about it?
If I recall correctly, I think I had Ohio State as the number 1 overall seed, so I don't know how I did, but
I didn't. I definitely did.
Bill definitely did. Let's start with Bill's bracket then. So, Mike, producer Mike, we can put this up. This is what Bill Landis predicted in the last week of October. Landis, do you want to run through your bracket?
Do I have to? Yeah, sure. So my number 1 seed was Ohio State. 2 was Georgia. Nailed it. 3 was Clemson. 4 was Kansas State. 5 was Oregon. 6 was Texas A&M. 7 was BYU. 8 Miami. 9 Penn State. 10 Notre Dame. 11 Indiana. And 12 Boise State.
So, Bill, you got 1 exactly right, and you got 7 of the 12 overall. So you get 15 points for this portion. So you have Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, No, wait. Oh, Ohio
I got
State,
8.
Georgia,
I got 8.
Clemson. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, you did get 8.
Just trying to shortchange me. Come on, now.
I am shortchanging you. 8 correct and 1 nailed. So Georgia as the 2 seed, you got exactly right. You also have Ohio State, Clemson, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Indiana, and Boise State in. How do you feel about that overall, Bill? You think you did that? Is that pretty good? Pretty good stuff?
I actually don't feel terrible. Like I know that I got the one seed and team correct, but I wasn't thinking that Ohio State was going to lose to Michigan. So I don't think at the time that having Ohio State as the 1 seed was ridiculous, because the scenario that I had played out. It was just that Oregon ended up winning the Big Ten and was the 1 seed. And I also thought A&M was going to beat Texas in the regular season, which is why I have like A&M basically in the slot where Texas should be. So I feel okay. Like I was off on Miami. I was wrong about the Big 12 being able to get 2 teams into the field. But no, I don't think it was a total laughingstock. It wasn't great, but could have been worse.
Yeah. 8 out of 12, 1 nailed. Let's go to the genius that is Ari Wasserman. Ari Wasserman, would you like to read your bracket as producer Mike puts this up on the screen?
This is electric. Okay, so I actually was on the this was the week that Ohio State had their offensive line issues, right? So this is how it's all coming back to me now. Okay. So we have Oregon number 1 as the Big Ten champion.
Nailed it.
We have Georgia number 2 as the SEC champion.
Nailed it.
Miami 3 as the ACC champion. That was wrong. Iowa State 4 as the Big 12 champion.
Good try.
Close. Good try. Wrong. 5 is Texas, a team that I thought at the time would lose again, and they did in the SEC championship game. So they're 5. Penn State 6. Notre Dame 7. Tennessee 8. A&M 9. Wow, we both had A&M in there, huh? That was a wild time. Ohio State 10. Indiana 11, and Boise 12.
So are you guys catching that there? That Ari nailed the 5, 6, 7 seeds 6 weeks out? Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. Pretty stinking good, brother. You got 9 out of 12. You got 5 seeds exactly right.
So I got a lot. That's the bonus.
That's awesome.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So Landis only got 1 seed exactly right. You got 5 seeds exactly right. The 1, the 2, the 5, the 6, and the 7. And then, I think by the time we got to Saturday, the day before the selection came out, you had changed your minds on some of those seeds. You should have thought what you were thinking in October, brother, because you were all over it.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's the thing with these predictions too. I want to act like, oh, that's super smart, but it's like such a cyclical week by week thought. And you just got me at the right time. So it feels good. I put Ohio State in the 10, but not because of the way they actually ended up there. So I didn't think that they were going to lose to Michigan either. So
yeah, but pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then mine real quick, I also had Oregon as the 1 seed. That was the only thing that I nailed. I had Texas as the 2, Clemson as the 3, Kansas State as the 4, Miami as the 5, Notre Dame as the 6, Ohio State the 7, Tennessee the 8. That was close to being nailed. BYU 9, Georgia 10, Penn State 11, Boise State 12. So I also got 9 out of 12 right, but I only nailed 1. So the overall points on this, Ari got 23 points, I got 19 points, and Bill got 17 points. The team that we all had in that didn't make it was Miami. And Ari, I think you've talked more about Miami this year and analyzed Miami more than Bill and I did. Were you shocked in the end by the Miami-Syracuse loss? Were you shocked that this Miami team, with the talent I think you felt they had, did not make the college football playoff?
No, not shocked, because their defense was bad week in and week out routinely. And they felt susceptible to losing a game they shouldn't have lost. And I think if you were to ask every Miami fan out there, they were kind of saw that from 100 yards away. I don't know that we thought that Kyle McCord would make it rain out there the way that he did. But if you go back and look at Miami's results, they gave up a lot of 30, 40 spots along the way. And, a lot of times they got away from losing games by having what I thought was one of the best offenses in the country. And they did. But at a certain point, you can't, you guys have covered this long enough to know that if you have a leaky defense, it's going to get you eventually. So I'm not shocked that this happened to them. No.
Okay.
But I also think that Miami is the poster child for every single human being who's irrationally yelling that schedule doesn't matter right now. And I think that going 10-2 and not winning and any real quality wins is like literal, deflection back to anybody who thinks that. So, because in most years or in some years, 10-2 Miami gets in. So it just didn't work out that way this year.
Yeah. Bill, the other thing that we all got wrong was nobody saw Arizona State coming. I just want to make this point. We don't want to live in the past too much. We'll get to the other stuff. But we did this the week before the first playoff rankings came out. The AP poll this week, the week that we did this, that had just come out 2 days before we did it, Arizona State was 5-2 and had just lost at Cincinnati. They didn't get a single vote. It's not that they weren't in the top 25. They didn't get one 25th place vote, Bill. So nobody could have predicted this. From this moment on, they won out. Mm-hmm. So we were wrong on the Big 12. Ari was closer because he at least had Iowa State that made the title game. You and I each had Kansas State at this point. And then, Bill, you and I each had BYU wins. So we thought the Big 12 was going to get 2 at this point, and they didn't come close to that. That conference just collapsed around us, I guess, right? I mean, I don't want to say collapsed, but it changed.
It definitely changed. Yeah, it shifted. I thought BYU and Kansas State at the time were just kind of on a collision course to go play in Dallas, and clearly they weren't. And Arizona State was like never on my radar. Because that loss, I know, like looking back at it now, you said like, well, they lost to Cincinnati without Sam Levitt, and they had to play Jeff Sims in that game, and it's understandable why they would have lost that game. I think it might have been on the road too, right? Was it at Cincinnati?
Yes, it was.
So it's just like, they're 5-2 at the time. I just of the teams, like even in the Big 12 that I thought like might be pesky and shake up the Big 12 race, I wasn't even thinking of Arizona State. So maybe I should have been, but definitely I don't know that anybody was at the time.
Well, all of us were surprised enough about Colorado doing it, right? Like Colorado, I think for a minute there, I was surprised by even Colorado. So who could have seen Arizona State coming?
Yeah, I think probably should have been more open-minded to the idea that the Big 12 was going to get kind of crazy toward the end of the year, and I certainly wasn't by picking the 2 teams that I picked. But shout out to Ari's boy Kenny D for getting it done.
Yeah. And the one thing that I remember from that show is I did not have Indiana in my playoff field at that point, and I was like in a panic. I thought 11-1 Indiana was going to get left out. I was in a panic. And Ari, we spent like a lot of time in the middle of the season debating 3-loss SEC versus a 1-loss Indiana and that kind of thing. In the end, that was not a discussion point for like the last 2 weeks of the regular season. What did you think of how that played out? How did that play out on your show that we wound up that Indiana was a slam dunk? They were in.
Yeah, well, that it was a rational thought. Now, I think we learned one thing unequivocally about the committee this year. And by the way, I haven't listened to your guys' show yet breaking down the actual bracket, but I thought this was the furthest departure from what we usually get from the final selection than what we've gotten in the past, right? Like this year, there was a real emphasis and consistently, so I don't get mad when it's consistent, on playing for your conference championship, and the seeding didn't reflect resume, which I thought was bizarre. So, for me, like I'm okay with that as long as they view everybody the same. The thing that drives me nuts is when they make inconsistent decisions based on individual teams. So they made a line in the sand and they followed it through and through. Because could you imagine if they would have kept Penn State and Texas up there and then put Bama in? That would have made zero sense. And they've done stuff like that in the past. So, but you are touching a nerve with me here, and hopefully intentionally. But like I have lost my mind the last 3 days just watching SEC people go crazy about the scheduling and threatening to not. Out of conference games, we're not going to do that anymore and all that stuff. And I think that there is a real, and it just should be obvious to everybody, but if you play a schedule that in the strength of schedule metrics say is hard, then you are afforded an extra loss, right? So like, I think in the Indiana discussion, because Indiana didn't play a schedule that is viewed as difficult, and the one game they played against a team that is in the playoff field, they lost pretty handily. They had zero margin of error. If they would have been 10-2, they would have been unequivocally out. And I think they might have been out or unequivocally out if the Ole Miss South Carolina upsets didn't happen, right? Like at the end of the year when Ole Miss lost to Florida, I mean, I think that happened in the same window or the window after or was it the same window that Indiana lost to Ohio State that same day when Ole Miss lost to Florida that kind of opened it back up? But I think Indiana would have been
the same day.
I think Indiana would have been in deep trouble if Alabama and Ole Miss had 2 losses. Like, I don't think Indiana would have gotten in, but because they had 2 fewer losses, they were safe. Mm-hmm. But it's not because Indiana did anything that you were wrong about. It's because the SEC beat each other and upset losses happened. So paving the way to do that were those things. Now, I think it's like the SMU Alabama discourse for going into Sunday and since Sunday has just driven me crazy, because, you know, there has to be some reward for playing a tougher schedule. And I think that we could probably say, you know, that the SEC schedule that Alabama played was more difficult than SMU's as a fact, right?
Right.
But there's a line of when it's too much. Like, you can't use strength of schedule to excuse everything, right? Like, you lost 2 games to very bad teams, and the second one was a bridge too far. So Indiana got in large part because Ole Miss and Alabama both melted down in unexpected games at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I don't know that we've given enough appreciation to that, Bill. Like, because it kind of happened. Yep. But honestly, right? Do you agree with the idea that if Ole Miss beats Florida and Alabama beats Oklahoma in November, Indiana's out?
Definitely. You felt it that day when it happened. I think there was, because if I'm not mistaken, those games were both at noon. And I think by Curt Cignetti's post-game press conference, when he sort of was dismissive of the question of, like, do you guys think you're a playoff team? I think it's because he knew that Ole Miss lost. I don't know that he would have acted that way if he knew, if that result had gone differently. Or maybe he would have. He's Curt Cignetti. I don't know.
He came in late. I was in that news conference.
He was like watching the end of the game.
And I thought he was watching the end of Ole Miss. Yeah.
Because I know, like, we were in the Ohio State press conference, and like Ross Bjork and Quinshon Judkins were watching the end of that game on Ross Bjork's cell phone. So, like, I think everyone was pretty keyed in on what was happening there, because obviously it had ramifications for the Big Ten in Indiana specifically. So I agree with Ari. I think if there was a 10-win SEC team, and definitely if there were 2, Indiana would have been in pretty rough shape, and perhaps even SMU. It just happened to break the way for the Hoosiers on that particular day.
So I do think we can keep this in mind. This is like again, we're all learning from the first year of the 12-team playoff. But the last week in October, you probably, with a reasonable view of college football, could pick like 8 or 9 of the playoff teams, because that's what we did. And so there's a couple things like, you know, the Big 12 was hard to figure out. Miami fell apart. And other than that, you know, like, you're kind of in the right range of stuff. So, like, we'll just keep that in mind going forward. And you know what you can also do? Nail the Heisman picks. It's like, hey, let's do Heisman and playoff stuff. That'll be fun. We all picked the same 4 guys, Ari, to be the Heisman finalists, and we got them all right 6 weeks ago. Is that good or bad?
I don't know if it's in my head, but I felt like the fluctuation in the Heisman discourse this year was very tame. Like, it was very limited. Like, at times, and like Cam Scatterbo came out of nowhere at the end with how he played in the Big 12 and the numbers that he ultimately wound up with. But I also attribute that to also the coming out of nowhere of Arizona State, right? Like, you're part of that unforeseen wave, and I think he deserves to be there. But in terms of Hunter, Gabriel, and Ashton Genty, like, there never was any like, well, maybe they won't go. It was just them every week. And like, it's not usually like that. I thought it was kind of weird, but, you know, I guess when they're the best players, are the best players. You know what it is?
What's that?
It's the fact that there's no SEC candidate or candidates. Like, the SEC just didn't have the players this year. Usually it's that makes it, like, you know, up and down, but there was no SEC candidate to muck it up at all.
We haven't really talked about it on the show here, Bill. Were you surprised? So in the end, again, the 4 finalists are Travis Hunter from Colorado, Ashton Genty from Boise State, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, North, and Cam Ward from Miami. And those are the 4 that we all picked in October. So even though we were right from back then, I actually was a little bit surprised that those were the 4 announced on Monday. Were you at all surprised, Bill? Or did you expect it? That's who it would be.
I don't want to get in trouble by tipping my hand on my vote. Mildly surprised. Yeah, mildly surprised. Not. I figured Cam Ward would go because there was just no other Southern candidate to vote for.
Yeah.
So, like, he got all the SEC juice. Whatever was there, he got it. I was less certain that Dylan Gabriel would be there, and he's been very consistent all year, but his numbers, like, just don't blow you away, especially compared to past Heisman trophy finalist at the quarterback position. But there's also not really anybody in the country with those kind of numbers who was on a team that had a season that I think would put you there anyway. So I think it makes sense. I thought like going into the final weekend, there were two guys in Cam Scatterbo, maybe Tyler Warren at Penn State, who could have played their way into the conversation. And probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have felt the same way about Will Howard at Ohio State. And obviously he didn't do that against Michigan either. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, like how surprised I am, 10 being the most surprised, like I'm like a 4 maybe that we ended up with the guys nailed kind of midway through the season.
I will say, I thought if you said which players this year drove their teams into the playoff, that they were the force that made their teams one of the 12 teams that gets to do this. I think 2 guys fit that criteria. One is Ashton Genty, of course. But Ari, I think the other one is Cam Scatterbo.
Yeah,
and
so when
no offense to Dylan Gabriel, but like he's the leader of it, but I don't know. I would say he's the driving force of Oregon's success.
Yeah. Is Dylan Gabriel, without like being mean, just like there because there was no one like else? Like when you asked Bill, were you surprised about the finalists? It's like surprised because of what? Because Cam Scatterbo wasn't a final. Like, is that the only other person that, like, who am I forgetting that should have been in there? Like Cam?
Yeah.
I assume he'll be 5th.
Okay, yeah. So he probably will be 5th. So maybe like surprised in the sense that they didn't invite him because they do 5 every now and then. But like in terms
of a new rule, they only do 4 now.
They do? Okay.
Like 2 or 3 years ago, they decided that, which I don't love. But
yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, it's good to know.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess like what Bill said then. I mean, I think that the 4 that we've been talking about all year were the 4 that wound up being there. The thing that I mean, I've listened to your show a lot, and you guys have talked a little bit about Will Howard being a potential candidate. Like I've heard 0 Will Howard all year. Like that never even occurred to me that he would even be in the discussion. So
if he would have played well against Michigan and gotten Ohio State into the Big Ten title and then played well again there, I think he very well could have taken Dylan Gabriel's spot.
Yeah, it's interesting because at On3 we do all year until we cast our ballots because you can't promote it. Top 10, 5 people just submit a top 10, and then they average it out and put a poll out in a graphic and whatever. Never Will Howard, always Jeremiah Smith was Ohio State's representative on that list.
Yeah, I guess it could go Jeremiah too.
Yeah.
If you went crazy.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I do think, but you were on the Scatterbo train. I know that, Ari, right? More than some of the other people at On3. Didn't you have him 3rd at various times?
Yes. I had him 3rd for the 2 weeks leading into the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought playing on championship game weekend maybe would have more of an impact than the fact that Cam Ward wasn't there. Travis Hunter's Travis Hunter, right? He doesn't have to play on conference championship weekend, but the fact that Cam Ward wasn't playing, I thought maybe opened up a spot for people. All right, let's stop living in the past. We all did a great job. We're all geniuses. Ari is the geniusest of the 3 of us. So congratulations to Ari Wasserman. We'll do it again every year.
What world are we living in?
Yeah, no,
how about that?
Literally anybody's never said that about me. Yeah, I
the smartest one. Okay, let's talk first about dark horse team in the college football playoff. And Bill, I don't think this is an easy conversation because we talked about this. Everyone's been talking about it's like 4 teams in the first round that are favored by a touchdown or more. So it creates dark horses, but who is the team that you're really like, yes, them? And it doesn't have to be a first round team. If you think Arizona State can win a game or 2, like they could be a dark horse too. So I don't know that this is an easy conversation. I'm not sure it's an interesting conversation, but I guess I am intrigued to see what you guys say. So maybe it is interesting. Who is your dark horse for the playoff?
For me, it's SMU.
Okay.
I think when you have a dynamic athletic quarterback like Kevin Jennings and a pass rush that at times has looked like borderline overwhelming for some teams, I think that can get you a long way. I wonder about the pressure that Penn State might feel to win that opening game. Obviously, it's playoffs. There's pressure no matter what, but like Penn State being the poster child for the expanded playoff, all that was going to do was turn that first round game like into a referendum on James Franklin. And now all of a sudden he's playing a team that is in the power conferences for the first time this year. And I know they're not like an overwhelming favorite, but they're going to be viewed as one going into that game. And it's not it doesn't fall into the category, I guess, of some of the big time opponents necessarily that James Franklin has come up short against. I know we've had that conversation. It's mostly Ohio State and Michigan, but there are a few others sprinkled in there too, even dating back to his time at Vanderbilt as a head coach. Like, you have to win this game if you're Penn State. Like, this would be bad for James Franklin, I think, if they do not win this particular game. So I wonder what kind of dynamic and atmosphere that might create there. And then you just, like, I think SMU is a good team, a good running back, good quarterback. I actually think like halfway decent offensive line for where they are. And if they can get past Penn State, pull off that upset, then it's like, I don't know, to take your swing against Boise. I think you're just as good as Boise State. So I like SMU, not as a dark horse to win the whole thing, but I think as a dark horse to get to the semifinals.
Okay. Interesting choice. Ari, who's your dark horse?
Tennessee. Because so this is going to conflict with my outrageous prediction. So I don't know, like when you say dark horse, do you mean like could win the national title?
No, just do better than people expect. So even winning one game as an underdog is that.
Okay. So Tennessee has a very nasty defensive line, and they have one of the best running backs in college football. And, you know, those two things could be very good for winning the matchup they have, against Ohio State and Columbus. As we saw in the Ohio State-Michigan game, the offensive line probably just isn't where it needs to be. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about Ohio State, and the salvation of Ryan Day's job and, turning the page on the Michigan game and all this stuff. But it's like, if you have a personnel issue and you are facing a person at end who might be a top 5 pick in James Pierce, and you struggle offensively, and then you give that offense a month to prepare, Nico another month to develop and become, a better quarterback in his young career, and they're handing it off to Dylan Sampson, who is very underrated. He doesn't get talked about nationally enough, but he's an incredible player. Like, that is not the best matchup for Ohio State, in my opinion. So for me, I think that there's a lot of people who will probably be like, falling into the Ohio State trap that I do every year, which is, they lost to Michigan, but look at all that talent. Whoa. I don't know that Ohio State has it this year. And that to me is the most interesting angle of the playoff too. It's like, is there going to be a response from Ohio State that it's like, oh, well, they lost to Michigan. There's a weird mental block when they play their rival, but holy crap, they're really good still. Like, is that going to happen? Right. Or are they just going to come out in the horseshoe on the 20th or whatever and not be able to block anybody, run into that nasty defensive line, not score much, and then lose 20-14? I don't know. But Tennessee would have been my dark horse regardless of that matchup, because I think that if you have a really, really good defensive line and a really good running back and a quarterback who I think has incrementally gotten better and has shown signs and flashes of being special, that's a pretty good combination of, like, if those things all line up at the right time, they could be dangerous. And, I think they could be dangerous against Oregon too if they were to beat Ohio State. So that's a tough first round matchup for Ohio State. And, I have really liked what I've seen out of Tennessee in flashes and in doses this year, especially in the first half of the season.
I just did we reference all the time here, the Brian Fremeau drive-by-drive numbers, offense and defense for the 12 teams in the playoff. The lowest rated unit of the 24 units, offense and defense in the playoff, is the Tennessee offense. It's 35th offensively. They are 4th defensively. But I do think there's a lot of emotional, mental stuff involved in this matchup, Bill. We've talked about it at various times, but do you think there is a comparison to what Ohio State did against Georgia 2 years ago, coming off a Michigan loss? Is there not a comparison? Again, Kirk Herbstreit talked about, what if they get booed in Ohio Stadium? Maybe they would have been better off being on the road. Do you think this...
What a psychopathic thing to say, by the way. Can we, am I the only, what?
I don't...
Sorry.
It's like, I do think Ohio State fans actually have a chance to maybe try to lift their team up here, although I never would criticize fans for booing, because if a team is not meeting your standards and expectations, then you've paid money for a right to express your opinion, but not that. Like, not to that degree. Like, oh man, they'd be better off playing on the field.
Just to buy the ticket, right? Yeah.
You guys
and
know the
game. The boos. Like, could you imagine if Ohio State ran out of the tunnel before the game started and they just got booed before the game started? Like, the boos could come out after if they're playing poorly. That's what boos are for. But like, booing your own team at home is that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Again, as people are like, that's his first comment about Ohio State. Like, what's the number one thing you think about Ohio State? they might get booed. It's like, okay. Do you have a vibe, Bill, yet on how you think this might go with how Ohio State will come into this game?
No, not a great one, to be honest. I don't think you can compare it to the Georgia game from 2022 for a lot of reasons. That there was much more time to prepare for that game. It was a totally different dynamic with Ohio State, as we've said several times. Ohio State was dead in the water and got new life to go play Georgia. They knew before the ball kicked off against Michigan that they were going to be in the playoff. It was just a matter of were they going to host, be on the road, or get a bye, potentially. So that's different. And I don't know. I just don't know like the emotional state of Ohio State football right now. Right?
Yeah,
there's not. I know Ryan Day was saying all the right things about like being reinvigorated by having the target there now that they know they're playing Tennessee, but they're also they're favored to beat Tennessee. They weren't favored to be. They were an underdog against Georgia. They can lean into that too, right? So there's really nothing there I think you could carry over other than the fact that it's Ohio State playing an SEC team, but it's Ohio State playing an SEC team at home and it's expected to win the game, at least by odds makers. So it's just very different. I wouldn't assume anything about Ohio State based on what we saw 2 years ago against Georgia.
No, I think because part of that thing 2 years ago was Ohio State being able to legitimately adopt an underdog mentality. Mm-hmm. And there's none of that here because it's an SEC team, but Georgia was viewed as a monster 2 years ago. Tennessee is viewed as at least to me, I think it's like, if Ohio State can't beat Tennessee, like what are we even doing here?
I think that's right, but there aren't a lot of people picking Ohio State, even though they are a favorite. Like I was looking at the CBS projections, everyone there like did a bracket, and I think like 2 of them picked Ohio State to win their first round game, and maybe 5 or 6 of them picked Tennessee. So if you can get enough of that, which I think Ohio State will, I don't think a lot of people will be picking the Buckeyes to win that game. They'll find a way to cultivate that edge, even if they are technically a touchdown or 6-point favorite, whatever it is, by the time the game kicks off.
You know, when we were covering it together, every single time Ohio State lost, it felt like a funeral. You know, we always used to joke about that. Are people still mourning? That's the question. The funeral happened, but are they
in the what do you mean?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Like,
yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Like it's like every time, like I see Ryan Day on TV, like I have like a sense of like I feel bad for that guy. Like he's really going through it right now. You know what I mean? Like it's not okay. They had a bad loss. They're gonna go take care of business. It's like is that team just a wounded duck right now? You know, and I can think like, that could be the thing. It's like, are they swinging in the Woody, excited about the chance of winning a national championship, or is it still dark in there? You know, and I don't know how you predict, you know, one way or the other, but I also think too that unless you think, and maybe you should, that Ohio State has some sort of emotional mental block with Michigan itself, Tennessee could replicate what Michigan did to them very easily, you know, because you say, their offensive line or their offensive numbers are bad. It's like, well, I mean, like they just lost to a team that could barely get a first down for half the year. So, you know, to me, it's like if they come out with some innovation, try some new things, new sets, new formations, plays we haven't seen this year, you know, use some imagination, all of which did not happen in the Michigan game at all. And they play like they played against Georgia, they could win the national championship. I just don't know if that team, even from an emotional standpoint, is capable of that right now because of how terrible it went last week. That's all.
I mean, I definitely think there's both things could happen and should happen. One of which I do believe they have a mental block against Michigan, and there's a chunk of what happened there that I don't throw it out, but I just don't think it really applies to any other game. But also they had to have learned lessons, Bill. And when we were sitting watching the Oregon-Penn State game, the Big Ten Championship, we were talking about that. There's just football lessons Ohio State should have learned, regardless of the opponent, of when you play a good defensive line, get your skill guys in space and don't run up the middle 20 times.
Yeah, and Ryan Day addressed all of that on signing day last week when we talked to him. It was like, yeah, we should have got the ball on the perimeter more. Yeah, that we were running too much on the inside. But I don't know if that means they're going to change. Like acknowledging it and saying what you're supposed to say to those questions is one thing. Actually putting a plan into place that puts yourself in a better position to win the game is another. I think they probably will, but there's also just like the pure personnel, like mano a mano, can you block Tennessee question, right? That like maybe that's the best plan ever. And it's like, it doesn't matter because James Pierce sacked Will Howard 6 times. You know what I mean?
And I think that Doug like contextualized it the best on your show. I was listening to it in Nashville this week, and it's like, wait, you're telling me that you realized on Tuesday that you shouldn't have done the thing that every single fan on face of the earth was yelling at their television in the second quarter? Like, that makes no sense to me. And it's like, if your mental block is so big that you can't even recognize in-game adjustments that a 10-year-old would be able to figure out, then like what are like so for me it's like there's so much benefit of the doubt that you can give. And I continually for the last 3 years have always come back to Ohio State's got so much talent. Look at the receivers, they'll figure it out. Like in 2022 against Georgia, they almost did it. But I hate to be brutally honest in how I feel about this, but like from a coaching standpoint, do they ever show us anything that's new or innovative or different or creative or catching an opponent off guard or doing anything in order to put their players in the best position instead of just having the talent advantage? Like and if they don't do it for the Michigan game, why would I think they could do it for this game? Like, because they're not wearing the same uniforms?
I think they did do it against Oregon. Like, I guess to counter that point, like they did some stuff with the Mecca Ibuka out of the backfield against Oregon that they had not done all year. So, and I think like against Penn State, they had some different like condensed formations and play action looks off of that they had not shown all year. So like that's actually encouraging. Like you're 100% right about the Michigan game. I think that's been a consistent theme is they don't seem to kind of layer in anything extra for that game. But I actually think outside of that game this year, Chip Kelly has done a pretty good job of finding some different things.
You guys watched the SEC championship game, I assume, obviously on Saturday.
Yeah.
Did you see that fourth down play where Steve Sarkisian snapped the ball through
between Arch
Manning's legs, and it looked like it went through his butt and into the running back's hands? It's just like, I'm talking about the Ted Ginn Jr. at tight end stuff. You know what I mean?
Do that, like against Michigan, when Will Howard went into the medical tent and Devin Brown was out there, they got into their tush push formation and then handed the ball to Quinshon Judkins on a sweep, which they had not done all year. So like that was different. It's not entirely
okay. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I don't know. It felt like to me, at least in the Michigan game, that they didn't really try much. But maybe I'm off on that. You guys watch it with a closer eye than I do. So
I do. I mean, I've brought up that point a lot. I do think Ryan Day's instinct is to like let's let our talent be our talent, and it's like, and sometimes that's not enough. And I think we have some proof of that. All right.
Well, just to put a bow on that, Doug. Sorry, the reason why I picked it is I do question whether they can just block them. Then you can analyze the psychology of it, but like I don't know. I'm not convinced that Ohio State can block Tennessee. And then two, who knows what the tenor is in the building? Those are the two reasons I did it. So sorry.
So you agree with Herbie? You think they'll get booed off the field and lose? No, but I mean, these are all. It is. I mean, it's like Ohio State is in a super interesting spot because they have football questions because they've talked about like, well, will they have 5 different guys out there on the offensive line? Not 5 different, but will it be the same? There's real football stuff, and there's just like mental, emotional. They started off at natty or bust, and now there's questions about are they going to win an 8-9 game at home in the first round? Like there's a ton going around with this team, which makes it very interesting to talk about.
I'm going to be there with you guys, so maybe we can have a little group hug, huh? Maybe get my paws on you.
See, I'm not going to be there. I won't be there. Sorry.
I'll be there.
Yeah. Bill will be there.
All right.
I'll be at Penn State. Then. I'll be at Penn State. If they let me in, I got to get my credential. So I thought maybe we'd all pick the same because my dark horse is Clemson. And this is more about Texas. And we'll talk about this more, Bill, next week. But I said at the end of the Tuesday show that I think maybe the 2 teams with the biggest quarterback question marks going into the playoff are Georgia with an injured Carson Beck and Texas with Quinn Ewers as a quarterback who can't run and also has a lot of turnover-worthy plays. And so Texas has not really – their best win this year is Texas A&M. And this now we're getting back into like your resume and what your seed should be. I'm not 1,000% sure how good Texas is. And Clemson's been playing with house money. And if Cade Klubnik just goes in and outplays Quinn Ewers and then they get Arizona State in the next round and all of a sudden the 12 seeds in the semifinals, I don't think that's impossible. And I'm not a Dabo – I'm not here to praise Dabo, but Clemson's got some juice, I think.
I'm not 1,000% sure how good Quinn Ewers is. I'm pretty confident that Texas's defense is pretty good. Okay. And also pretty confident that Clemson's offense is not that good. Like there's a chance where Cade Klubnik very obviously outplays Quinn Ewers and Clemson still loses. Because Texas' defense and more specifically its defensive front is quite good. But I Dabo's been there before, and Texas seems a little vulnerable when it comes to trying to score some points. So like it's definitely a reasonable dark horse pick.
Defenses in the playoff, just in the country, by the Fermo ratings, Texas 1, Notre Dame 2, Ohio State 3, Tennessee 4, and they're all in there. What do you think of Dabo making a run, Ari?
I don't think they'll score much against Texas.
Okay.
Like I think that that matchup, their offense versus Texas's defense is a really tough look, I think. And like they scored 14 points in like the first 5 minutes of the SMU game, and I was like, what? I was like surprised that they scored 14 points against SMU, and like Texas is, but I'm like 100% with you, Doug. And I think the same exact thing about Georgia. Like I think that the Texas Georgia game was it revealed to us who those two teams really are. Like I think that like offensively, and this is going to go into my outrageous prediction, but like that's it. Like, and we know that Carson Beck's injured and might not play in the game, but like, I don't want to give away everything I'm going to say later in the show, but like I have major questions about Texas's offensive situation. Okay. And if Clemson can score a little bit, then I think if Clemson can get to 24, they could win. I think it's that dire.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, are people down in Texas fired up for Quinn versus Cade again?
I haven't heard much of that, but I think that
I don't know if like Dave Campbell's Texas Monthly, whatever, had like a whole magazine dedicated to it.
Shahan Jeharaja is fired up, I'm sure. But like,
I don't even remember because it's been so long. But like the circumstances of why Cade went to Clemson, did he have a committable Texas offer at any point? And like, were they just high school rivals who he wanted to go be the next Trevor Lawrence? I don't remember that, but like they did play each other. So yeah, I do love how college football always just has these like homecoming things that just randomly happen.
I mean, it is Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, right? It's just a different version of that.
Yeah.
All
right, let's do game you're most excited for, Landis. What is the game you're most excited for potentially?
For me, it's the Ohio State Tennessee game. For all the reasons we just talked about for 10 minutes, I won't rehash them. But it's like an SEC team is coming to the shoe, man.
Yeah,
it hasn't. I think I was like trying to look this up kind of frantically. I think I'm right. It hasn't happened since 1988 when LSU played in Ohio Stadium in September of 1988. So that was before I was born. That's a long time ago. And then Ohio State and Tennessee, I think, have only played once in the Citrus Bowl after the 95 season, so the 1996 Citrus Bowl. So like the rarity of it, the myriad circumstances around it that we just laid out, but also like the two fan bases I think are probably more similar than they are different, whether or not they'd like to admit it. So like getting those folks mixed up together in one place, and I know there's only 3,500 tickets available for Tennessee. I'd imagine Tennessee will scoop all those up and then have more than that in the building beyond that. So it just has like it is a combination of things, so I think, to create one of the better college football atmospheres we've seen in quite some time. So I'm fired up for that one.
All right, what game are you most excited for?
Ohio State, Tennessee. And I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but like, listen, I don't know if it's just me, guys, because I have a morbid curiosity about Ohio State because of my background.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's anything more interesting in the sport this year than Ryan Day's response to what happened to Michigan and what happens to him into the offseason. So, like, to me, it's like, obviously you have the Tennessee SEC coming north, angle to it. But like my angle is like, is Ryan Day going to bounce back at all? Or is this just the end? Like, I'm like, it's reality television, man. Like, that's all this is. And, I wish we would have, and I said this to you guys before the show, but like as the bracket was being released, I was thinking of like you with your sword and your crown in your office there, Doug. And I was just like, I was hoping we'd get more, southern going northern games. And unfortunately, this is the only one. But, I am too excited to see if Indiana can surprise some people because they have been the national punching bag. I don't know how much of it you guys get in your audience, but like in mine, the entire country resents Indiana's presence in this thing. So it'd be cool to see them like show people that they belong.
They can cram it. So this is mine. It's not a first round game. And this is a little personal for me, but I would imagine there's some other people out there too. And it's the possibility of a Penn State Notre Dame semifinal, which I don't think is impossible. But I just want to say this. So this is when Penn State and Notre Dame have played each other in their history, okay? They played in 1913, 1925, 26, 28, 1976. And they've also played in 2006 and 2007. And they also played 12 straight years from 1981 through 1992. At a time when I was growing up in Pennsylvania, that's when from when I was 8 years old to 19 years old. And to me, growing up where Penn State was the major team, I thought Penn State Notre Dame was the biggest rivalry in college football. And I also thought that Notre Dame always sucked. And I didn't know that Notre Dame was supposed to be good, because the first time they started this 12 straight years. The first year of it in 81 was Jerry Faust's first year. And there were Penn State fans in my family, and my grandfather was a Notre Dame fan. And I was just like, wow, why is my grandfather a Notre Dame fan when these guys are horrible? And I did not realize that I was like entering Notre Dame football at literally the bottom of their entire history. But then during that 12-year period, Penn State won 8 out of 12. Penn State won 2 national titles in that period. Notre Dame won 1. Penn State finished in the top 5 out of those 12 years. Notre Dame finished in the top 6 4 out of those 12 years. After they fired Jerry Faust, Lou Holtz came in. It was Joe Paterno the whole time. It was 7 years of Holtz versus Paterno. So Landis, you might get the, I mean, I guess you were too young for this, but like, I'm just telling you. And then, so after 92, they've played twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was
35 years since then.
I was at the 2007 game. I was a sophomore at Penn State that year. So I got like an appreciation at that time for what it meant for those two teams to be playing each other again. I was very young during that 10-year. Well, I wasn't alive for most of it, but then very young for the back half of it. So I don't recall much of that. But like, yeah, when Notre Dame came to Beaver Stadium, I think was that Jimmy Clausen? I think Jimmy Clausen might have been the quarterback for Notre Dame. That was maybe one of the better, like a top 5 environment of like my time at Penn State. Like it was the people there like knew what it meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think like in the North, right, where obviously Ohio State's dominated and Michigan just won the national title, and Ohio State, Michigan's the best rivalry. But to me, like the chance in the Orange Bowl, that would be in the Orange Bowl, these two traditional Northern powers who have not been as high as Ohio State or Michigan in recent times, to play a national semifinal in Florida with some of this history. Like I am super jacked for this, Ari. And it might just be me, but I'm sure I'm making you sad. What do you mean?
Yeah, because right now the plan is for me to go to the Cotton Bowl, and you're going to get to watch that game.
No,
you're sad to come hang out with me, Bill?
I'm looking forward to hanging out with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I like
Penn State, Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, Ari.
I like that. I also think too that, to go along with the theme of your show, to prove that I'm a listener, like there have been 3 candidates, right, for you guys, how do you put it, the capital of Northern football? Columbus has been that for so many years. Michigan's the defending national champion, and Oregon's been awesome. Like, what are the capitals? One of those 2 places this year?
Yeah,
like, I don't know. Penn State showed me a little something on Saturday night that I didn't know was in the tank.
Right.
And for them to be playing for a spot to advance deep into this tournament, each other, 2 Northern teams, like, isn't that kind of what the whole show is predicated off of? Like that's it right there. And it's not
like a Northern semi.
And it's not just Ohio State and Oregon. Like that everybody already knows that. We've seen that already this year. It's 2 teams that have been frankly doubted. And I don't know if I messed up with the dark horse thing or if Notre Dame's not a low enough seed, but like that team could go win this whole freaking thing, I think.
100%.
Like if you go, I mean, I think that they're really good. So absolutely buy what you're saying there, Doug.
Okay. Let's do some outrageous predictions for what will happen in the playoff. Bill, what is your first outrageous playoff prediction?
Notre Dame will shut out Georgia in the quarterfinal.
Oh. Come get it. Come get it. You already have
I actually don't know.
I
don't even know if it's that outrageous.
Get it.
If it's a one-dimensional Notre Dame that can't throw the ball because Carson Beck's
one-dimensional Georgia,
or one-dimensional Georgia. Sorry. If Carson, I'm assuming Carson Beck's not going to play, right? And like, I don't know if they make a Gunnar Stockton or if he even knows what planet he's on for taking the hit that he took in the SEC title game. I guess he'll have enough time to recover from that hit before that game gets played. But I just think like Notre Dame's defense is maybe the best defense in this field. I know that you said Texas is number 1 by the Fermo ratings, and I think that defense is awesome, but Notre Dame's ability to like adapt throughout the year to a couple of key injuries, the way it plays up front, I think like Al Golden just feels like he's had a really like good plan for every team that Notre Dame has faced, and they've faced some unique offenses along the way too. And obviously Marcus Freeman is a huge part of that as a defensive-minded coach. I think there's a very, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't say very good, but I think there's a decent chance that we like go through all of this and look back on it. So like, what was the best thing about the college football playoff? And we say it was Notre Dame's defense.
Okay.
And I think they'll show that. I mean, they might even show it. We've seen what Indiana has done on offense playing against elite defenses. I'm not going to call back-to-back shutouts for Notre Dame's defense, but if Notre Dame like got to the semifinal, having allowed like 3 touchdowns in the first 2 games, I don't think I'd be surprised by that.
Love it. Tremendous. Ari, can you match that? What's your outrageous prediction number 1?
I mean, I don't know. Mine might just be like a cliche-ish to outrageous prediction, but I think Arch Manning will be Texas's starting quarterback in the quarterfinals if they advance.
Yeah,
I think that you're gonna.
That's not boring. But do you think he could be the starter for the first game, or do you think that's off the table that they wouldn't do that?
I think that if they were going to do that or felt that was a thing, it would have happened when it should have, which is on Saturday. Like I think that they played the wrong quarterback the entire game. I don't know. Did you guys get that feeling when you were watching it?
I thought they should have put Arch in. I think it became very apparent they should have played Arch. Just put Arch in.
So yeah, the question is if it's apparent to us, is it because we are overestimating what Arch Manning is actually capable of, or is it just a loyalty issue? And we've seen that, with people before too. Like Quinn's been here a long time; he's older, all that stuff. What's the mental block there? Because they couldn't move the ball at all against Georgia, and I know Georgia has a good defense, but like this isn't the first time that I watched Texas and go, their offense is scary as hell. Like I think that during the back end of the season, I felt how I felt about Texas's offense, every week. And, you're not playing for friendships here. You're playing to try to win. And, at the very least, I think that his inability to escape pressure is going to cost them when they play really swarming defenses. And the one thing that we know unequivocally that Arch Manning can do is run the ball well. They have an entire package of him running the ball. So they've already shown that they understand that too. So at a certain point, like if you yank him out of the Georgia game at home, Quinn that is, then why aren't you doing it again in the same type of situation? Like it was kind of bizarre to me that he didn't play at all. I thought they had packages for him that he was going to play regardless of how it was going. He didn't play really at all. I think he's going to play a lot in the playoff if they're fortunate enough to advance.
Okay. You agree with that, Landis?
I do.
You like that one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is a statistical one. My outrageous prediction one is that Penn State running back Nick Singleton will lead the playoff in yards from scrimmage.
I like that.
So that requires Penn State to win some games. Of players in the playoff, he is 8th in yards from scrimmage this year. Ashton Genty, Cam Scatterbo, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, Jordan James, Ty Warren, Phil Muffa are ahead of him. But I'm reading Tyler Donahue, the Penn State beat writer, just tweeted that he's averaged 6.8 yards per carry the last 5 games. And Landis, we just were watching that. Again, we've talked about this a lot. I've been talking about Nick Singleton a lot. He just looked great against Oregon. And if that's the guy you get, I would give him the ball a ton. And I think he was like my most dangerous man in that region. And this is taking that a step even further, Bill.
Yeah, I just think he's healthy. He almost looked like a guy who hadn't played for a few weeks, right? I know that he had, but as I've said before, like middle of the year, he didn't look himself, and back into the year, he started finding the form again, and just was. I guess he wasn't the most explosive player in the field because Tez Johnson also played, but those two guys both, I thought, just like looked like they were playing at a different speed than everybody else on the field in that game.
All right, Bill, what is your second outrageous prediction for the playoff?
I wanted to do an Arch Manning one, but I won't. I'll back off that. Can we ask you a question? If I make an outrageous prediction about how far I think a team will go, can it stand alone as an outrageous prediction, or am I also locked into that when I make my
it can stand alone.
Overanalyzed?
Picks? No, being outrageous is different than your actual picks.
Okay.
Because again, this year you picked SMU to win the ACC as your outrageous prediction.
That was a really good pick, by the way.
But you actually picked Miami to win the ACC, both of which were good picks. But I think those both fit. Like you couldn't pick Miami as outrageous, right. But SMU had the 7th odds to win the ACC, and you picked them to win it. That was a tremendous outrageous prediction. So yes,
thank you.
You can do whatever you want.
Okay, then Arizona State to the national title game.
Okay.
I think it's more of like what I think Arizona State might be able to do if it can get past Texas and play Oregon, because the way that Penn State ran the ball against Oregon, if I'm a Ducks fan, was pretty concerning.
Okay.
Because Penn State has had a good rushing attack and a good offensive line for most of the year, but just good. And they really pushed Oregon around in that game. And I don't think Arizona State's offensive line is as good as Penn State's, or like maybe not as big or as athletic as Penn State's, but that's what they do with Cam Scatabo and Sam Levitt running the ball. So if they can get there, and it's a big if, because like as we discussed, Texas's defense is very good, and that defensive front is going to cause a lot of problems for Arizona State, and maybe they just never get the run game going and they can't beat Texas. But I don't hate the matchup with Oregon if Arizona State can get there. Assuming it is Oregon, maybe it's Ohio State or maybe it's Tennessee, but assuming it's Oregon, I think Arizona State might be able to give Oregon a little something with its run game. So I'll say that Sun Devils to the national title is an outrageous prediction.
Okay.
You and I are on the same page here, Bill.
Look at you.
And so we've done these videos since it was the back of an iPhone in the Woody. I know I always forget the rules. It's like, do I have to absolutely believe it, or can I think it's like my outrageous prediction I'm going to put out there and just I think maybe it could happen, but like I don't.
Yeah. It's like a money line. It's like an underdog. Like money line bet. Yeah,
throw it out there. No Big Ten or SEC team in the national title game on either side.
Wow.
And honestly, Bill, you echoed the Arizona State thing exactly how I thought. Like, I was like, wow, Oregon's defense is really, really giving up some yardage here on the ground. And like, I think I think Sam Levitt's really, really slippery too. Like, I don't know if I'm reinventing the wheel here, but like he's got a little something there. And if they've got that little ELE, everybody love everybody, like that Mata used to say, going on in the building, playing with house money, they're loose. Like, again, it's going to be really hard for Arizona State to get there, but I think if Arizona State can figure out a way to play Oregon, they could be in that game.
Okay.
And on the other side of it, not as spicy as the Arizona State side, because Notre Dame seems to be playing really well right now, figured it out. Like, it could be, what if the national title game was Arizona State, Notre Dame?
I like running the ball, so I'm here for it.
Yeah. No, I mean, they could find it, but it's one of those things. It's our sport. This is what our sport gave us. But also, everybody was excited when the Dodgers and Yankees were in the World Series, because the World Series is the World Series, but Dodgers-Yankees is different. So I don't think the TV execs, but who cares about TV execs, Ari? They can cram it.
That
earned it.
And that's like a 20-1 long shot ticket for me. Like, I don't know if I'm all the way there. Because anything can happen, but like Arizona State, I think is better than the consolation Big 12 team in this. Like, I think they're I think they're dangerous right now.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to play them.
Okay. All right. So mine is along those lines, kind of like big picture stuff, but mine is no Southern team will beat a Northern team in the playoff, which actually, when you get down to brass tacks, maybe is not that outrageous. So all that means is Georgia loses to Notre Dame in its first game. Tennessee loses to Ohio State. SMU loses to Penn State. And then Arizona State, Clemson, and Texas have their own little bracket. So somebody in there has to win and come out into the semis. But then whoever does loses to Oregon or Ohio State. Or I guess maybe it's Tennessee, but no, it wouldn't be Tennessee. It would be Oregon and Ohio State. So actually, it's not that difficult. But boy, oh boy, will I be swinging my sword if that happens. Come on.
This guy, if we get an all-North national title game in Atlanta, you're going to dress like Sherman and then actually march to Atlanta.
Oh, I've been trying to think about what to wear, because when I was at the Renaissance Fair buying my two swords and my crown, they do have custom-made capes that you could get, like a king northern cape. But I'll just dress like Sherman. I'll just dress like a Union general.
Yeah,
that's what I would do. That would be better, right?
That's where you got the swords, the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah, the sword maker. These aren't.
You didn't get a turkey leg though. You believe you didn't get a turkey leg?
I mean, I thought that was the whole reason they were in business, but I've never been to a Renaissance Fair, so I mean, I'd be
tremendous.
Yeah, I've been to the state fair in Texas, and there I also got a turkey leg. I think that if the word fair is in it, you should get a turkey leg.
Yeah, but do you think that's possible? Like, is my thing even not that outrageous?
No. Well,
I mean, you're talking about home teams holding serve early, wounded Georgia losing to Notre Dame. No, I don't. I mean, for it all to kind of unfold that way, I think is outrageous. Like, if you look at all of them on case by case basis, I don't think it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are you excited? So, Ari, I know I'm not trying to cram it up your cram hole, but you were not a huge believer necessarily in the 12-team playoff. You were a 4-team truther for a while. Where are you right now? Would you rather have a 4-team playoff right now instead of this?
So the reason why I'm a 4-team field truther is just because I want the results of the games we already got to matter. And for a while there, at least, and I think you and I would be on the same page with this, Doug. It's I didn't just want to watch the SEC schedule again. You know what I mean? It was we got the SEC season. We didn't need another one. And for a while there, it was okay, I don't want to see that again. But here's the thing that has fundamentally shifted, which is maybe why my opinions changed. I was a 4-team truther because for my entire professional career, there were only 5 teams in the sport that could win a national title in a given year. And I was why do we need to expand this thing to 12 to value the regular season only to have these 4 SEC, Ohio State monsters just beat the crap out of the other teams? But what we've gotten this year in the results shows that there are no super teams and that I legitimately don't know who's going to win the national championship. So, thank you for even asking because no one's asked me, but I actually like the 12-team playoff because I feel like everybody in it could make a run. But if it was just a 12-team playoff and you had 2014 Ohio State, 2020 Alabama, and 2021 Georgia in the bracket with all these other teams, I'd be what are we doing? But the fact that there's so much parity in the sense of Arizona State being in the national championship wouldn't be the most insane thing I've ever seen. And not knowing what the result is beforehand, I think makes it better. Now, the question is, do you think that this is the new college football or if it's just the way the years played out? I don't know what it's going to look like. But if this is the new college football, then I think the 12-team field serves this version of football better than the 5 mega team era.
They don't plan anything and they treat everything in separate little silos. But I think what Ari's saying, Bill, the idea that we got the portal and NIL, which spread out the talent and flattened the sport a little bit at the exact same time that we expanded the playoff, sounds actually like a great plan. Let's give more teams opportunities and create rules that make more teams better. Except that was never the plan. It just happened. But I think it is where we are.
Yeah, I don't want to give anybody credit for that, but I do think because it wasn't by design, but I think we ended up in a good place. There are other parts of that conversation that clearly aren't working when you talk about the timing of all these things happening at the same time. But I do think the sport has leveled out at least a little bit. And will that be consistent year after year? I don't know. I think probably not. I'm sure we'll still have those years like what Ari's alluding to, where it feels like there are 2 or 3 teams that are clearly above the rest of the sport. It just so happens in the first year of the 12-team playoff, I don't think the sport is that way. So I'm glad for the first iteration of this, the sport kind of shook itself out in a way where it does feel like more than a handful of teams could actually win it.
Yeah. All right. All right. Tell the people who love you, and there's so many of them. If they're can you imagine someone turning on the show and being I have no idea who that guy in the middle is, but I love that guy.
I hope so.
Listen to him more. If there's somebody like that, how can they find you?
It's so much better than I know who that guy is and I hate him, which happens all the time.
Not him again.
So you can find me on YouTube. Just type in Andy and Ari On3. That's our show. We go live from 8:30 to 9:30 Central Time every morning from Monday through Thursday, and then in the off season that'll be Monday through Friday instead of the Saturday night show that we do now. And I write columns for on3.com, the national site. Just go to on3.com and there's a 90% chance that you'll see one of my bylines right in your face right when you click on that. So thanks so much for being here and or for having me here. It's been great to be here, and can't wait to see you guys out on the road because I know I'm going to be going to playoff games at every round. So I know I'll bump into both of you eventually at some point. So, and Landis, if you're coming to Dallas, you're staying here, right?
Oh yeah. I thought you I thought you had the guest room ready already.
Oh yeah. Nice. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's your house. It says Landis on the top of the door. Good. So yeah, ready to go.
I will say I just ran a test both on Google and on YouTube. I typed in Ari and Andy show and it found your show. So you can put it that way.
Yeah.
It still gets there.
Yeah. Thank you,
anyway,
Mom, for naming me the most Jewish thing possible. It makes it easier to differentiate when you're Googling me. But yeah, been great, guys. And I love your show and love you guys both.
All right. He's the great Ari Wasserman. He'll be back again down the line. But for now, we'll take a quick break and be back on Kings of the North. Back on KOTN. The folks love them. Don't they love him, Bill?
How could you not?
How could you not? He's so lovable, so funny. So we were very glad to have Ari join us, and we'll get into what you're watching, what you're eating, what you're thinking. But Inside Carolina, Bill is reporting that the Belichick thing is progressing towards a finale, and that Bill Belichick is finalizing a deal with North Carolina.
Good luck. I just don't think. I don't think that's going to go well. I guess you can throw this back in my face if it does, but
I guess and we've cited this before, our theory on like falling coaches and trying to catch them, right? And again, that I think Charlie Weiss and Les Miles at Kansas were two good examples of that. But you would look at that. I think at the time you also could have said, well, I don't know, what else is Kansas going to do to get sort of a big time guy who was famous at one point and very successful earlier in his career? I don't know. Is this a worthy swing? Now, Mac Brown, the one thing about this is this feels very much like Mac Brown. Like, what's the difference between Mac Brown and Bill Belichick? You're catching guys kind of on the way down. But he's the greatest coach in NFL history. Like, if it was Saban, would you take Saban right now?
Of course. Yeah.
Saban instead of Belichick, we'd be like, oh my God, why didn't the North get Nick Saban?
Yeah.
North Carolina's getting him. So why do we think that much differently of Belichick? Is it just because he's never done it? He's never been a college coach?
It's 100% what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Like he can think Bill Belichick. I know he was on, I think like Pat McAfee, and said like, well, college football is more like the NFL now. And there's a kernel of truth to that with how rosters are built, but it's not the same thing, man. Like coaching 18-year-olds is not the same thing as coaching 28-year-olds. And he can think that it is, but it's not. I think he's in for a bit of a rude awakening. I have no idea what his staff is going to look like other than assuming hiring his son to make him coach in waiting, because he's certainly earned that. I don't know. Like it's going to be, it's like Matt, because you're catching a guy like on the way down. I think it'll operate more like Deion Sanders, because I don't think Deion ever leaves Boulder. People come to him. So the same will have to be true. I do you envision Bill Belichick going to some kid's home in
I
don't know, Memphis, Tennessee, to convince him to come to UNC, right? Like, he's not going to do that. So does he have? I mean, he is maybe the best ever to do it, right? So like, he has cachet, and people will want their children to play for him, but I don't know if he's the dynamic personality that people are going to be super fired up to go play for. Like, Tom Brady and I think like Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski were on Fox this week just saying like, there's no way this will work, because they know Bill Belichick better than anybody. It's like, well, if they don't think it will work, why the heck would I think it's going to work?
So he'll just sit in his office and close and flash Super Bowl rings and tell stories about Tom Brady and close recruiting deals with the help of NIL. And I guess, so it is, that had been reported that he wants Steve Belichick, currently the Washington defensive coordinator, to be his defensive coordinator and be the coach in waiting to set his son up for a job. We already talked about that. But do you know who, according to his Wikipedia page, is not currently employed, who would be available, I guess, to be the offensive coordinator? Josh McDaniels, son of the North. His offensive coordinator in New England, who was a pretty good offensive coordinator, but didn't succeed as an NFL head coach. But now you're just replicating the Patriots at the 43rd best program in college football, which just feels kind of weird.
Yeah. And also, like, not to be one of these guys, they're not going to have Tom Brady.
No, you're allowed to be that guy.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, because what do you? Yeah,
they broke up, and one guy continued to win.
Yeah, it's like if you're getting the guy who went 7-10 with Mac Jones, right? Like, that's what he was most recently. Yeah. So this, Tom, I guess like Tom Brady doesn't have a kid ready to play college football. So anyway, Bill Belichick at the end went 7-9, 10-7, 8-9, and 4-13 in his last 4 years with the New England Patriots. So That's what you're getting. Okay, good point. You have strong feelings on this, and I'm here for it.
I just think it's like I get when like the guy with all the Super Bowl rings wants to come coach your team. I can see why that could be enticing. Like I kind of think it's like BS for people who have worked in college football trying to get somewhere, and then like here comes Bill Belichick parachuting into UNC when like I honestly don't think he deserves the job or has earned it. But whatever. I'm just one man.
You're just one man, but I love it. All right, we're gonna do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking. What have you been watching, Bill Landis?
It's been hard to watch a lot new, but it is the holiday season. I'm a big Christmas movie guy. Are you a big Christmas movie guy? Like I have some stuff I need to watch every holiday season.
I'm kind of an Elf only guy. What else you got?
You know, what's interesting is I have never seen Elf. I've actually never watched Elf.
You?
Yeah.
But like you're boycotting Elf?
No, I just tend to watch the things that I watched when I was a kid. Elf came out, I think, maybe when I was in college. So I drift toward the things that I watched as a child, like the stop motion, like Mickey Rooney.
Oh
Santa
yeah,
Claus is coming to town, and Year Without a Santa Claus. I need to watch those every year. But last night, as I was doing some work, I also watched another movie that I try to watch every year. Is the I guess it's the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. Richard Attenborough plays Santa Claus. That might be like my favorite Christmas movie, even though like it's clearly for children and I'm an adult man. But I like it. It just kind of gets me into the holiday mood. So I was watching that late last night as I was doing some work.
Oh, can we make a thing of Landis watches Elf, and we give you an assignment?
I need to watch
come back and report.
Need to watch it. Yeah, I for sure need to watch it.
The problem would be that perhaps because it's about a man-child. Mm-hmm. And again, sometimes I don't want to watch sports movies because my daily life is sports. And so maybe you don't want to watch a movie about a man-child because your daily life is working with this.
You also kind of look like Will Ferrell. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get it. You might hate it. You might have like a really negative reaction to it of, I didn't need to see that.
I like Will Ferrell. And what's her? Zoe Deschanel's in it too. Like I like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an elf advent calendar that my wife got me. So every day of this Christmas season, I open up a little thing and there's like a little elf guy. Have you seen the clip when Will Ferrell eats cotton balls?
Nope.
Okay. You've got to watch that. In my advent calendar, 2 of the days in my advent calendar were cotton balls. And I really had to stop myself from popping them in my mouth because I thought that actually would be a way to die, to eat cotton balls in real life. Because that's just movie magic, eating cotton balls. I don't even know how they did it. So please, you do what you want. I'm glad you're in the Christmas spirit.
Always.
But I think you might like Elf.
I think I will.
Has your wife seen it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not boycotting it. I like Will Ferrell. Okay. I just have never sat down to watch it. I couldn't tell you why.
Okay. Because you're watching these other Christmas movies, and I'm glad you enjoyed a Christmas movie last evening. That's a lovely thing. You're in the Christmas spirit. Okay. So I think everybody gets this. You get attached not just to TV shows, but the TV characters. I think that would be a fun thing to do. Who are your 5 or 10 favorite TV characters of all time?
Yes.
So what is happening now is that a couple of my all-time favorite TV characters, those actors are now who are on separate shows are now on a show together, obviously playing different characters. But to me, I'm thinking, I can't believe it's that guy and that guy. I am so excited by this. So the one thing that has happened, I think I've Shrinking on Apple TV on this show previously. Jason Segel is the star of it. I'm a big How I Met Your Mother guy, and I love Jason Segel as Marshall. If I made a list of top 10 characters, Marshall would be on my list. But there is an actor that I loved on 2 shows who I really, truly love, who is Damon Wayans Jr., who was Brad on Happy Endings and just absolutely cracked me up, and also was Coach on New Girl and absolutely cracked me up. And now Damon Wayans Jr. has joined the cast of Shrinking, and there are just scenes with Coach and Marshall. And I just watch it and I think I can't, and they're both like, I'm maybe, I don't know, 5 or 8 or 10 years older than them, but they've both thickened up a little bit, as men are apt to do. You know, they're not quite just the trim looking dudes they were in their 20s. They're still very handsome men, just thickened up a little bit, but like a thicker coach and a thicker Marshall, just chopping it up on shrinking. I am absolutely here for it. And then shockingly on the most recent episode, another character from How I Met Your Mother appeared on the show. And I don't want to give it away for people who are watching it and haven't seen the episode yet. I was freaking out. I'm so excited.
Wow. I don't want to guess who it was either.
Yeah. I don't want to ruin it for people, but it's just like worlds colliding.
I didn't know that Damon Wayans Jr. was on Drinking. That makes me want to watch it even more now. Because I like Jason Segel too, but like Damon Wayans Jr. is very funny. Yeah.
The script that's in my head that I still like is on my off-season list to write this TV script. One of the characters I have like pigeonholed for Damon Wayans Jr. because I would want that guy in my show. I think he should be a superstar. I think he should be an absolute comedy superstar who is headlining movies, and he's not. And I think he is just absolutely kills it every time I see him. Okay,
you get all the Wayans in there. Prolific.
Let's do it.
Family.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll just make it an all Wayans script. Maybe not the White Chicks guys. I'm okay with them, but I'm a little more some of the other guys. Right. What are you eating?
So I wasn't on. Was it last week? You and Mike did it, right?
Mike and I did it,
which would have been the show after Thanksgiving. And so we for Thanksgiving this year, actually we've done it the last 2 years. Instead of getting like a full on turkey, because there's just really the two of us eating because our son doesn't eat all that much. We got a turkey breast and we got a Cajun style turkey breast this year. It's just it's a much easier like cook and prep. There's hardly any prep involved. You just kind of take it out of the bag and stick it in the oven, and you don't really have to do much with it after you put it in there. And it takes like 2 hours to cook. So that like it's a much less involved, easier process than trying to cook a whole turkey, or at least a good whole turkey. But then afterward too, it made for tremendous sandwiches because the Cajun seasoning was out of this world. So I don't know. I'm sure there'll be a day when we get to a point where we're cooking a larger Thanksgiving meal for more than just the three of us. But I don't know that I'll ever go full turkey. I've been converted to the turkey breast side of a Thanksgiving meal for the rest of my life. And maybe you have to get multiple if you're feeding more people. But I think that's the route that I'm going to take now because it was easy and it was delicious.
I am totally out on dark meat. So I think the dark meat aficionados would be the ones who would want the full turkey. Where is your family on dark meat?
I actually prefer dark meat as well, but I was okay without it because because I really, when someone makes a full turkey, and maybe just the people in my family have been bad cooks, but I find the white meat not all that appetizing, like usually like kind of dry. This was not the case. Like this was a pretty succulent turkey breast.
What a good word.
Yeah.
What a good word. I actually like dry turkey. I like dry everything. I'm a maniac. So I'm like,
you can just see
dry that meat.
Might accomplish the same.
Oh my God. So good. All right. So eating, you and I discussed this. And again, there's a lot of things we talk about on the show. We may have discussed this partially previously, but I had smash burger for dinner last night because it was, I think a lot of people do this, like our high school, one of the booster groups, it was a night. If you go there and you say, hey, I'm here for this booster group, then that group gets some money from the restaurant and the restaurant gets money because you encourage people to go. So it was at Smash Burger. So we went, but you and I are discussing like just the fancy burger industry, Five Guys, Smash Burger. Who else am I? Who are the main Shake Shack, right? A little bit. Yeah. Shake Shack's maybe a scooch less fancy, but it's fine. It's a very difficult industry, I think, because we were talking about the idea that feels like a vacation thing. On vacation, when you're kind of maybe you're moving around and you don't have time for a big sit down meal, but you're on vacation, so maybe you want to get something a little. But at home, I'm happy with the Wendy's burger, or I want something completely different. So I do think it can be a tough nut to crack, a tough needle to thread, to find yourself in the correct fancy burger mood where you want to pay for the upcharge. I mean, I got a smash burger. It was like a $9.59 hamburger. And it's like, are you sure you want that instead of Wendy's? So that business model, if you're just sitting around the house, it's like, I don't want to cook tonight. What do you want to do? Let's get fancy burgers. I don't have that vibe much.
Oh, I think I'll always prefer a fancier burger to a fast food burger.
Really?
Because even like you can also kind of kill two birds if you go to like a Culver's maybe. Because
Culver's, I
Culver's
think, is which I got to get Culver's as a
yeah
sponsor.
yeah
Culver's is right in between. Culver's is a half step up from Wendy's, but a
mhm.
half step down from Five Guys. Right?
Yes
That is, it's right half step down from Smash Burger, right in the sweet spot. Mike is saying
yeah.
Swenson's, which is again right in that. Like, there's, I'm not a huge Swenson's guy either. Mike's gonna Northeast Ohio is gonna murder us now, but yeah, burger tiers, both
Akron's finest.
Akron's finest. See, I knew. Here you come in. It's like, yeah, oh, you want to bring this? Mike, this is sword territory for Mike, like us disregarding Swenson's.
I'll tell you,
But
the best thing at Swenson's is their drinks, though. The California
And
drink.
there's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want a burger, but that's a fancy thing too. That's not, if you're sitting around for dinner, it's like, what do you want for dinner? It's like, I could go for a really good drink and I don't really care about what the entree is. Right. So it's a tough one. I do think Culver's is right perfectly on the line. But how often are you fancy burgering it up?
Not super often. Yeah, not super often. There actually is a Culver's not too far from my house now, which is nice. But I might go there once a month, maybe.
I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna call them and see if they want to do this with us. What are you thinking about?
So I wanted to talk about this a couple weeks ago, and then I forgot about it, and then it happened to me again this week.
Oh,
I want your opinion, I guess, on what the etiquette of this is. I guess I'll preface this by saying, like, I am not the kind of person who is going to confront anybody in public for like doing something that I think is rude unless they like really go over the line. But if you're in a super long checkout line, be that, you know, a regular checkout line or a self checkout line, and they open another register to clear that clutter, and you just happen to be like, you're like very clearly sort of like the first person who should go to that new line that they've opened, and someone behind you goes before you.
Yes.
Is that okay? Because it really ticks me off. I don't mind it if it's like of course, like if it's like an elderly woman, like of course they can go, or like a mom with a bunch of kids and like I'm like, please go ahead of me. But if it's just like another dude who's got as much stuff as I do, and then that person goes before me when there's been like an established queue for who should be next, it really bothers me.
I think it is a black mark on your personality, and it is one of those things where, is it worth getting in a fight about at the store? But it means you're a terrible person. And is there some satisfaction in knowing that, like, especially, right? So it's 9 deep. You're third in the 9-person line. This guy's 9th in the 9-person line. And as soon as they open that, he like sprints to be the first person. Like that kind of person, you're a horrible, horrible person. So is it worth like as the guys up at the front of the line, like a little like shout, you know, like, oh, don't worry, nobody else was in line. Congratulations on sprinting. I might be worth that. No,
a little passive aggression. Yeah,
a little passive aggressive. Like try to make them feel bad, and either A, maybe it would make them feel bad and it would change behavior, or B, if they have a problem with it, then just maybe it's go time.
I'm not trying to get into a fight in Target because I had to wait an extra 3 minutes to check out. I just like it would just never occur to me to do that.
No, because like it's like, hey, I'm aware of it, but like you wait a moment and let the line kind of, hey, are you guys going over? Okay, no, I'll go over, right? Yeah. Mike's ready to go. Mike's ready to fight in that situation. Is that Mike jumping in to fight?
Well, it's so funny that was just brought up because I had this experience literally 2 days ago. That's something very similar. So I'm at a no-name grocery store, and there was probably 5 people in a line. Okay, and I'm like fourth, and they don't have like self checkout aisles or anything like that. So you got to wait your turn. And, you know, there's people in front that all have, you know, a different combination of how many items. And we're all standing there, and this young girl comes up, walks to the very front of the line. She has one thing that she's buying. Now, I only had one thing as well, but she has one thing that she's buying, but she walked all the way right up to the front and asked the people that were next in line. She said, hey, I am only buying this one thing. Can I jump in front of you?
What did
And
they
I
say?
was like, I was like perplexed. I was like amazed that she did that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess that's incredible. She has the guts to do that, but like, that seems ridiculous.
You also need to start from the back, wherever the back is, and ask
Yes.
each individual person.
Right? Yeah.
That-
Like
Yes.
she just walked right up to the front. I mean, just
Yeah.
right to the front. And I was
I-
like sitting there and I was buying chicken and I had like a package of chicken breasts and I'm like, I only have one thing, but I didn't go
Right.
walk up in front of everybody and say, hey, I need to cut you.
So I will say, as Mike started telling this story, I was like for 20% worried. I actually didn't think it would happen. I was like, is Mike's story going to be, I was at the back of the line and they opened the new line and I jumped those oldsters. Sorry. I was like, oh my God. So I didn't think Mike would do that. But I do believe in societal behavior modification.
Mhm.
And I do believe it, and it's not worth, like, especially in a society where you don't know what somebody's doing or has on their person or whatever, it's like you're going to actually get in a fight. But when society lets people get away from with things and people never change their behavior, it affects society in a negative way. So I do think it's not just somebody being passive aggressive. It's like, that's not how we operate as a group. And we have to remind people there are rules that make it all function better for everybody. So I think there is actual value in calling people out for behaviors that are anti-society in the moment, because maybe they'll change it next time. Like, is that crazy to think that you can change behaviors?
No, because I don't think if it happened to me in public, I wouldn't stop thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it's crazy, but it also is like in the grand scheme of things, it's not wrong. Like she only had one item while people in front of me had, say, 10. But it's a different thing to just go do it. Or
Yeah.
then someone else being like, hey, you only have one item. Why don't you just go in front of me?
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
something like
And
that.
sometimes
Like if
people
someone
do
did that, then it's understandable. It's like, yeah, well, keep going. Yeah, you just got one item, go ahead. But to just breeze everybody.
Right.
And I'm like, man, that's crazy.
I'm
And I
also
do think, like-
anti going to the self checkout with a shopping cart just full of crap.
Oh,
And just
yeah.
standing there for 15 minutes scanning your stuff.
Yeah. So I do think, I mean, and the other thing that I think is a good reminder, especially around the holidays, of when somebody is doing something, you don't know what's going on in somebody's life. You don't know if they have somebody in their family who's sick and they're trying to get back to their house as fast as they can, or if they've had a terrible day at work where their boss yelled at them for no reason, or if they're having financial struggles and like their mind is somewhere else and they didn't even realize they cut people, you know, like I do think, especially around the holidays, giving people grace in situations is good. But I also think calling out jackholes is good. So I don't know what to think. I don't know. I like both.
I think you can read the room whether the person is being a jackhole or if they're just, being nice. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
one of my favorite shows is Ted Lasso, and one of the quotes in there is "Be curious, not judgmental." So I'm always curious. I try to be curious. Like, why did that person just do that? Other than like, that person's a jackhole.
Yeah. I think Ted Lasso's kind of a turd. So I'm usually like judgmental.
Wow.
I'm judgmental first and occasionally curious. And I'm like,
Wow.
all right, Jason
Those are
Sudeikis, with
fighting
your
words.
little, I know. My wife wants to fight me about it too. Look, I like the guy on Ted Lasso who's kind of like the jerk and like left to go manage another team. And I was like, I would do that. So that was, now I got to take off my elf hat because I ruined everybody's mood. But anyway, let's be on alert. When to be gracious and when to call people out on behalf of society. Keep that in your mind this holiday season. Last thing I'm thinking about is my wife and I were talking about this. She kind of suggested it. Should we be doing this for the Heisman? We all vote. They announce the finalists, and then we revote during the week among the 4 finalists, which is how they do every other vote. With the Biletnikoff and the Davy O'Brien and Bill and I, all these things that you and I vote for, we vote all along the way.
Yes.
You vote for the top 10, then you vote for the top 5. Then they say, here's the top 3. Now pick a winner. Why don't we do that for the Heisman? Especially because that way you could be throwing people third place votes because maybe you think someone really deserves to go to New York. But now it's almost like ranked choice voting. It's like a primary, actually, more is what it's like. It's a primary. Yeah. And now here are the final 4 candidates, and now vote for your top 3 out of these final 4 candidates. So anybody who voted for Cam Scatterboo or Ty Warren or Shadur Sanders or anybody else, it's like, okay, That was a great vote. They didn't make it, but now we really want to make sure we get it right here. And again, the point, I sent my ballot in, and as much as I've complained about the Heisman stuff sometimes, I was working on my ballot. I sent it at 3:10 or something on Monday. They called me. I had just sent it in. They called me and said, as of 3:00, we don't have your ballot. And we just wanted, like a real human being called me. We just wanted to make sure that you're going to vote. And I was like, I literally just sent it, but thank you for calling me. And then we had to have our ballots in by 5. They announced the finalists, Bill, like at 6:30.
Yeah.
And it's all digital. So the idea that as soon as they announce the finalists, now they resend you a ballot that is due by 5 p.m. on Friday, so they can hand it out on Saturday, is very doable logistically. But would that be a better? I don't know that it would change the outcome. I don't know. I think maybe sometimes it would. I don't know that it would change the outcome this year. But what do you think of that idea? And again, just because that's not what they did in 1951, when you had to mail stuff to people, doesn't mean it's not the way they should think about doing it now. Would that be better?
I think it could help. Yeah, like you said, I don't think it would have changed much this year, but they're definitely, because I don't know. Yeah, because the people who were going to get first place votes were going to get them either way, I guess. But there have definitely been years where the vote has been split enough where maybe it would have made a difference. Like I've voted in the past, I think, for guys who ended up not going to New York.
Right.
So I wouldn't hate it. I guess there's an issue of timing, but it's not even, if you know that you have the 4 finalists and you're just voting from those 4 and you're still going to invite those 4 to New York anyway, it's not like it creates extra logistics for like setting up the show or setting up the travel for all those guys. So I think even in the past, the Biletnikoff has been like, maybe your semifinalists were due by like Thursday, and then you had to have and then maybe 4 or 5 days later you had to pick your finalists, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, it could be done. I get I don't know how the size of the Heisman voting body compares to the size of the voting bodies for the other awards, because the Heisman,
I think they're bigger
people, right?
Yeah, I don't think the other. I think the other ones are between 1 and 500. They're not 8 to 900.
So I guess there's that, but I'd be okay with it. I think it makes sense. I mean, I think they should. You and I agree. I think they should move to after the season, but
yeah,
at the very least,
that. Okay. Last thing to talk about is we are doing our pool. We are going to have an awesome playoff bracket Northern Bowl pool. We're going to have more details about it by the end of this week, and you're going to have a chance to enter it by early next week. And so we just are finalizing stuff, but it is happening. It's going to be super cool. Get your friends ready to do it. I hope we can have some final stuff to tell you about specifics on the Thursday show, but we are super fired up, and we're going to have a good time. And we want to do it for our community, because without you guys, Landis is just a guy who has to go to work with a man-child every day. And who would enjoy that?
Who hasn't seen Elf? Yeah.
Who hasn't seen Elf? Mike also brings up the point. We are setting ourselves up for the greatest scandal in college football history, which is when one of Bill Belichick's players steals Bill Belichick's girlfriend.
I'd watch that. That's good television.
Maybe she just convinced Bill to take the job so she could leave him for someone her own age.
Yeah. So
maybe she's trying to do that thing where like your family member can go to school for free, so they'll get a sham marriage, and then she can get a degree in finance from UNC.
I mean, with the price of education these days.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're in love. Who are we to say? Who are we to say?
You know what they say?
He's a mermaid.
Be curious, not judgmental.
Not judgmental. Okay. It's hard to be curious, not judgmental, when you have a sword in your house.
What about a watch along for Bill to watch Elf? People are saying that in the comments, and I think that's a pretty good idea.
I would just be sitting, and then I would be sitting next to Bill on the couch during the watch along saying, "Do you like it? Do you like it?" Ooh, I'd be wearing the outfit, and that's how he acts the whole thing. Yeah. All right, we'll do that. We'll play it out. I mean, what else do we have going on besides a gigantic 12-team playoff that's never been done before? We'll throw in an Elf rewatch. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Thanks to our great producer, Mike Rostowski, for making us look good and sound good and throwing in good thoughts along the way. Like us, subscribe, do notifications, tell a friend. We'll be back on Thursday with all of our transfer portal stuff. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.